Well, good morning, everybody. We're back here with the Digging Deep podcast, and with me, I've got Andrew Crawford and Tyler Griffin, and still kind of going along the lines of answering some questions and trying to, I guess, give a little more information on some of the stuff that we contend with on a day-to-day basis. And really, one of the first things we want to talk about today is going to be essentially what type of weed content are we seeing right now? What have we done about it already, and what still is there left to do to contend with it? I'm going to kind of open up the floor for these guys as far as what has the chance to break through our pre-emergent barrier anyways. What's the hard stuff to fight, no matter how good of a pre-emergent program you've got in place? Just what are the weeds that everybody's going to fight this time of year?
You've typically in weeds, you've got two different types. You've got a grassy weed and a broadleaf. Most of the time, this late into the year, your broadleaf stuff's already gone. It's not really a problem right now.
Yeah.
But one that's always going to be there is nutsedge. There's yellow and purple, but that doesn't really matter. If you've got it, you've got it. But a lot of times, thinner areas around the edges or anywhere where there's just water sitting, you're going to have problems with it. But it's not preventable.
If somebody didn't know what they were looking at, what would you say is a dead giveaway when they've got a nice turf and then they see something that looks out of place?
Yep.
How would they know that that's nutsedge?
So if we came and we mowed 3 days later, you've got little pockets and patches of kind of a flat, taller blade. It can be a little shiny looking in the sunlight, and then the little point up top, and then over its lifespan, it would go to seed and have the little seeds up top. But
Kind of looks like a bottle brush cleaner.
yeah, but typically you don't really see it get to that point.
Right.
They
They could also look at the bottom, and it would have a triangular shape at the bottom as well. And if you were really careful to dig it up, you would actually find little tubers and stuff around that.
But a lot of times you just break it off, and it 2-3 days, and it's right back up high.
And it spreads after you weed eat or cut it.
The
right?
tubers
and it just
go and come up.
Those little tubers will send up new shoots everywhere. What do you put on that?
So that would just be spot treated with a backpack. There's several different things. Tribute would get it maybe a little hot, since we're touching 90 degrees. You gotta be careful with yellowing up the turf too.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of those things where it really, of all the different treatment methods, whatever chemical you choose to use, it's a really hot product.
Yeah, it is.
And so you're gonna have to, your applicator's got to be super careful. Typically, if we're going to go do that on a property, we're going to mix iron in with it. But you can't put too much, because you don't want to have like this really dark green spot around where the rest of the turf took it up.
Made a problem fixing a problem.
Right.
Katana is really good.
Yeah.
I don't get as much yellowing with it, but
if you use something like Celsius,
you gotta,
it's
or
really
blindside,
hot.
you gotta get it. But I guess informing them, hey, this is the problem, this is what we can do about it, and you may see some discoloration around it, but it'll come back, it'll green back up, because we are putting fertilizer right now too. So
what's some other kind of grassy type weeds, since the broadleaf weeds have kind of, if they were going to make their presence, they've kind of already done it, and they're already starting to kind of phase out. What other grassy weeds are you still seeing?
I hadn't seen much of it, but crabgrass is another one that you could have breakthrough, and pre-emergence broke down by sunlight and water, and we've had plenty of that this year. So if pre-emergent does start to break down, you could get crabgrass in the yard. Dallas grass is another really tough weed. It's not a preventable weed. It's kind of the same as nutsedge. And then you've got all your broom sedge and stuff like that that could come up. We don't see much of it in our area, but and that could be from a pH imbalance too,
Yeah.
to having a bunch of that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, goosegrass, crabgrass, both of those are kind of nightmarish to get rid of. How would you just tell the layman how to identify both of those?
Dallas grass is going to be more of a clumping. It'll just be where the Dallas grasses came up and kind of killed the turf out around it, and it'll just be this big green mat, and it'll send up a long shoot with a little seed pod on top.
Yep. So you'll see a two-pronged seed pod at the top, and typically we'll have little black dots all over it, which are the seeds.
See, and if you've ever walked through a field and you look down, you got black all over your legs or pants.
Yep.
It's typically what those are, those little seeds.
What's your dead giveaway for like goosegrass and crabgrass?
They're going to be a wider blade.
Yep.
And then torpedo grass would be kind of the same.
And if you look down at the very base where that cluster of leaf blades are actually coming up out of the ground, you can look in the dead center and it'll all kind of span out from that spot. The center of your crabgrass will be sort of a pinkish plum color.
Yeah, purpley looking.
And then your goosegrass will be more of a whitish green color in the center. So those are good little ways to kind of help you in the field identify what your problem is and then figuring out how to deal with it. And those honestly are persistent problems in every landscape for every year.
All of your grassy weeds and sedges are going to be way harder.
Yeah.
The broadleaf stuff,
That's a pretty easy clean.
that's an easy fix.
Yeah.
But
Are you seeing any broadleaf stuff showing up in your beds?
there's a little bit hanging around. You get like some thistle or plantain, stuff like that. It's more of just a bigger, the sticker bush that everybody calls it, that would be your thistle. There's several types of those, but
I was on a property the other day that I was measuring for maintenance, so it wasn't a customer of ours yet, but they had a lot of vetch left, and it was pretty close to being spent, but you could see it from a mile away with all the seed pods on it were starting to turn and get ready to crack open and shed all their seeds, but they were all black, and you could see that from across the yard, and it was just, so yeah, there's still some stuff that lingers out there, but.
And then Virginia creeper, there's a good bit of that in the beds right now, and a lot of people mistake it with poison ivy, but Virginia creeper is the 5-leaf.
Right.
And it's not going to bother you, but it's another easy one to kill as far as spraying, but it's kind of hard to pull because you'll never get it all.
Yeah. Well, kind of along the lines, obviously if we want to define what a weed is, it's anything growing where we don't want it to be.
Just a plant out of place.
And, I'll let both of you speak to that as well, where we have landscapes and we maintain these properties, and sometimes the stuff that someone actually paid to plant becomes a weed, really. So I didn't know if you guys might have had some examples of, don't tell on anybody, but where you run into that.
I really like Sunshine Ligustrum. It's really, really pretty. It's a different color. You get that yellowy looking color. But at the end of the day, it's privet.
Yeah.
And then you plant it, and it's really good for the first few years, and then it'll go back to privet, and it looks terrible.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I was at a property yesterday where someone had, the house is probably 20 years old, and along the front foundation, pretty close to kind of the threshold of the front door and all, they had planted Carissa hollies, when the house was built, and they've been sheared and sheared and sheared, and that's still a Chinese holly no matter how you look at it. So in a lot of places, and there's probably 15 or 20 on either side of the front steps there, and a lot of it has reverted back to rotunda, and that stuff is gnarly. I mean, just, it looks like you need a blood transfusion just if you got near it. So you know, and that's more of a characteristic flaw of the plant, but still it's kind of one of those things where, you know, we've got a big property that Tyler maintains that has what, close to a mile of Elaeagnus surrounding it, you know, and it's like, does it serve its purpose? Yes. It creates a big, you know, visual barrier, a sound barrier. It does all of those things, but when it's 12, 15 feet tall and, you know, it's what, 8 to 10 feet thick?
Yeah, it's just a nuisance.
Yeah, it really is. It is.
Yeah, a lot of what I see on, you know, really all throughout Mountain Brook is, you know, everybody loves their Mondo grass, but I'll see where it's installed, you know, really several inches from the turf line, and it doesn't matter what you do, that turf is gonna creep into that Mondo, and it's honestly over with by the time it gets in there. I mean, you can kind of spot spray a little bit along the edges, you know, of your turf, but still those roots are going up under the ground and coming up through the Mondo, and there's not really anything out there to kill the grass, but and to keep your Mondo.
And going back to the grass, you just reminded me, years back I had a couple yards that I was treating where it's Bermuda on one yard and zoysia on the other.
Yep.
And they just, you know, the Bermuda's gonna get it all in it, and there's nothing you can do. You can't stop it. And same way with, you know, like you were saying on that, some stuff you just don't put together.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think, you know, installing some metal edging along the turf and the Mondo will stop that grass, but honestly it makes it more difficult, you know, because you're not going to get a nice clean edge on the grass, and those roots are just going to go right up under the edging. And
it'd be different if the edging were 3-4 inches above grade and about 8 to 10 inches below grade.
Yeah.
You know, if you could create a legitimate barrier, would be one thing, but
you'd have a chance.
But they don't make steel edging like that.
No.
So.
Unless you know, dug a trench and poured like a concrete curb around, you're not going to keep that.
But if you're going to go to that extent to keep grass out of your Mondo, I just select another plant.
Yeah.
Mondo.
we actually did that for a bed that had bamboo in it, and so the client asked us to come out, you know, a couple of feet past it, and we were like, "There's no way we can guarantee that it hasn't already made it out." And they're like, "Well, we don't see it anywhere."
Oh, it's there.
Okay. And so, and this was a number of years ago, but we went through and dug this massive trench. It was probably 2.5, 3 feet deep, maybe 8 to 10 inches wide. Cut it all the way out, encased the entire thing of bamboo in it, and filled it with concrete. And I think a summer or two later, he sent me a picture, and there was like a huge clump of it outside that. It's like, I don't know,
Can't get rid of it.
Well, it's just kind of one of those things where, you know, it's really almost impossible to just overcome in 100% controlled nature, you know.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, y'all have any other things that you're fighting with?
No, I mean, not really. That I can think of. I mean, like we talked about, the nutsedge always can be a pain, and especially when it gets in Mondo grass, you know, you got to be extremely careful treating that to get out of there.
Well, are you seeing it as much, maybe not like the plant itself, but maybe the placement of the plant. You know, like it is in theory a good plant, but it's not where it's supposed to be. And then you run a scenario, like I get having Elaeagnus all along the perimeter of a property. Some things I see, and I know we've touched on it before, but you know, like we've seen a property not too long ago where, you know, you've got trees that in due time as they mature are so close to the foundation of a home, they're going to cause irreparable damage at some point. And it's like, I just don't know why you would plant a tree that will be of that size, that magnitude at maturity. Why would you plant it to where the house even falls within its drip line?
Right.
You know, you're going to destroy hardscapes. You're going to destroy foundation of the house. You know, I just, you know, and that's easy for me to be critical of something, more so because we take care of those things. And over the course of time, we're on a property nearly every week, checking on stuff and seeing things. It's like, you know, what looks good on a piece of paper or in a plan, or, you know, when it's first installed, you know, you've got to have some farsightedness, you know, when you kind of put some of this together, because some of this is going to lead to, you know, really some severe financial, you know, issues down the road. But,
and I'll see a lot of, you know, like Asiatic jasmine planted, you know, installed way too close to other plant material, and trying to keep a buffer between, you know, the jasmine and, you know, your boxwoods or whatever. I mean, it's just a constant battle. As soon as that starts to take root and starts popping up, you know, it's a weekly
battle.
A weekly battle.
Yeah. Well, so kind of transitioning from, instead of weeds necessarily, what about like insects and diseases? What other kinds of things should people be paying attention to? Or what have you either seen on the property or you know is coming to the property this time of year?
Lace bugs on azaleas. Yeah, and I mean, you'll see those on every azalea every year. You know, so as soon as you start to see, you know, those white speckles on the top of the leaves, you know, going ahead and treating that with an insecticide.
So how do you overcome, you know, the idea that, you know, we obviously we don't want to hurt our pollinators. We don't want to be at risk of hurting honeybees. So, you know, we can't just go out there and just coat all the azaleas while they're in bloom. So what do? Like, how do we overcome that problem?
So really, I mean, a lot of times after they finish blooming, you know, going in with a contact insecticide, and spraying on the foliage of the azaleas, you know, and that being a contact insecticide, you know, those lace bugs are on the exterior of the leaves, and that really kind of knocks them out. You know, sometimes it may require a couple of treatments, but really just coating those leaves, top and underside.
Yeah, I know there's been plenty of times where we'll take and actually do an application where we marry those two, do a contact and systemic, where, you know, you're kind of getting two modes of prevention there. You kind of safeguard yourself a good bit more doing something like that. Even if it costs a bit more, I'd rather just go ahead and save the plant material and not have it all in jeopardy all summer. But you know, whether it's azaleas or it's, um, heck, even camellias and tea olives and different things like that. A lot of stuff that we treat, we're going to do that post bloom so that we're not running the risk of damaging pollinators. And that requires probably a lot more juggling on our part than I would like to admit. But if we don't, then you know we run the risk of having big bee kill-offs and things like that. And I don't want any part of that. So. I'll tell you, you know, something that we typically run into that we will always find is, you know, and this year we kind of got warm a little quicker, but typically mid-June or mid-May through mid-June seems to always have a spell of really hot, really rainy weather, and we run into we hit two things almost at the same time. You'll have cedar apple rust will show up on everything, and brown patch shows up. Both are really difficult to get rid of. Always just kind of a nightmare to fight with, and require multiple applications to get gone. And a lot of people don't even know that cedar apple rust is as detrimental as it is. But what kills me is we've kind of hit this fad of, there are a number of plants that have become very popular to plant, and they all fall into the pome family, which is akin to your apples. So all of these, you know, ornamental crabapple trees, flowering quince, winter king hawthorns, all of these different types of trees, shrubs, what have you, they all still fall into that family. Pear trees are no different. And so what ends up being some of the most showy or ornamental things that, you know, are kind of right up front in the landscape are the ones most susceptible to it. And, you know, it's a dead giveaway when it gets it. Bradford pears get it too. You know, you'll have this kind of sooty substance start to show up it'll show up on the foliage. There will be these little, you know, orange and yellow and black kind of fried egg looking lesions on the leaves. The fruit will have these bright orange kind of rust colored spores, and they'll be all over the place. And what's really, really frustrating about it is it can take and spread through rain, water, birds, bugs, people. I mean, it's as transmissible as COVID. And you know, and it can impact any plant within a 2-mile radius. So when you think about the types of landscapes and those types of plants being spread throughout all of Mountain Brook and Vestavia and Homewood, you're talking about, it's pretty doggone easy for that stuff to be everywhere all at once. And then you have to start a regimen, and you've got to be quick about it too. If you don't start treating pretty quickly, it's going to get away from you, and it's going to burn up. Kind of looks like the ends of the plants have been torched and burned up, and it's not going to do as well the next year. The fruit's not going to be right. The blooms won't be right on it. And, you know, you'll kind of play catch up for 2 or 3 years afterwards if you don't get it, you know, gone. But how difficult is it to get rid of brown patch?
At times it can be extremely frustrating.
Yeah.
Some of them you go out and treat once or twice, you're good. And then I've had some, it just sticks around and lingers and spreads. But, I mean, you can treat it, you know, with several different products, but I mean, it's just kind of a yard by yard situation.
Yeah. What type of turf do you see it the most on?
I would probably say I've seen it more in zoysia.
Yep.
Which is 90% of your properties.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's something that you just really got to be vigilant about, and it's it's just the time of year. It's really hot, it's really muggy, and then it becomes really rainy, and that's just a breeding ground
Yeah.
for fungal activity.
It's perfect for it. Nothing ever gets to dry out completely.
Yeah,
And if you don't catch it, and then you get later on in the season and it goes into dormancy, then
It's gonna pop right back out in
Yeah.
the spring.
yeah, yeah, and you'll end up with I don't think they're directly correlated, but it seems like if you didn't get rid of fungal issues before turf goes into dormancy, in most cases, I feel like you immediately come out in the spring with spring dead spot and stuff like that, where it just
Damage.
it's not going to bounce back.
yeah.
So, what other questions do we have?
I think we had one about like more edible plants and stuff in the landscape.
Okay, are you seeing that to be more and more of a trend lately?
A little bit. I remember probably 8 years ago, we had a guy and he wanted, a shrub that bloomed, but he wanted something he could walk out and get a snack, and blueberries are a good option.
Yeah.
I feel like people are trying to get back into gardening a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Not, tilling up their whole front yard or something like that, but just adding.
Some people will.
Some people do. But
And I think a lot of that's just, with the cost of groceries, people see that they can, get some seeds or
Yeah.
or whatnot and plant and tend to it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Social media will do some of these people disservice because they think it's as simple as, running up to Home Depot and grabbing a couple of little seed packets and
good to go.
go into the house and you shake them out and
Yeah.
and in a few weeks you've got these big beautiful tomatoes, and it doesn't really work that way. But no, we are starting to see, I think, more and more people, whether it's people asking more about us building planter boxes that they can grow a garden in, or finding ways where they can maybe kind of integrate some stuff, or have like have a full landscape, but they want to keep, this section of bed space open for, kind of this utilitarian area of, I want to plant a tomato and do this and do that and do this. And I think it's fantastic, like there are still lots of ornamental plants that you can plant that are still edible, or fruit, but at the same time, have an herb garden, have a place where you can grow some vegetables and stuff. Like you said, you could do blueberries, but it doesn't really take hardly any work. One of the easiest plants to grow is probably strawberries.
Yep.
Just you can plant that in a pot, you can plant it in a bucket, stick it in the ground, and it'll just take off.
Yeah, we used at my grandma's when I was growing up. She used strawberries as a ground cover, and I remember we could, you walk under the apple tree and there's nothing but strawberries under you. I mean, she used them everywhere because, back in those days, people wanted to grow their own, and I think people are trying to get back to that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I have a property that, she has an herb garden, and we install herbs every year. So, we just installed some basil, some thyme, oregano. Yeah, there's a number of options. I feel like over the past couple of years, there's been more and more customers who've started, whether it be herbs or fruit or things.
Yeah, I've got customers that have fig trees in their yard, which we keep them cut back so they don't get as many figs, because fig trees want to get big and bushy.
Yeah.
I've got 5 in the yard and they're 12 foot tall, but I'm trying to grow figs. They're just trying to get a few.
Right.
And we talked earlier about, fair amount of customers with espalier apple trees.
Pear trees too.
So seen a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, we've got customers with apple trees, pear trees. Um, there are some really pretty, more ornamental, like very small crabapple trees.
Mm-hmm.
Fig trees are fantastic.
Yep.
Um, you know, unfortunately for where we are, you can't get too exotic on the fruit side.
Mm-hmm.
We'd need to move a little further south to kind of get a lot of stuff that is more fruit, but yeah, there's still a lot of good stuff, and you know, I would encourage anybody who wants one. I mean, whether we build it or you do it yourself or what have you, but you know, grow a garden. You know, like we've got a pretty big garden. I'm the maniac who tilled up his entire front yard to grow a bigger garden. You know, but I mean, we've got potatoes and carrots, sunchokes. We've got garlic, rosemary, basil, thyme, oregano, tons of herbs, but at the same time, like we've still got cabbage going. We just grew another big splotch of lettuce, cucumbers and squash, tomatoes, multiple kinds of peppers, corn, watermelons, pumpkins, cantaloupes, and eggplant, you know, all kinds of stuff. And even if the area that they have available to them isn't as big as what we're doing, or they don't want the variety, or you know, maybe they're not willing to till up their entire front yard, like you can do a lot with a bed that you build that's 4 foot by 8 foot,
or just a few pots,
or yeah, get a couple of big pots and just, you know, put some stuff together. And there are really good complementary plants that you can put together that you know, are good for each other, but also, you know, we were always told putting basil next to your tomato plants will help keep tobacco hornworms off of them. If you want spicy tomatoes, you plant your peppers next to them.
Yep. And it's weird how you can play around with stuff like that.
Yeah.
And get different flavors that you want out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do a lot of weird stuff. And one thing that was kind of cool when I was little, we took an old glass Coke bottle, and Grandma would stick a limb down in there, and you get the fruit in there, and you show all the kids, and like, you know, how did you do that? How did you get, you know, a full apple or whatever in a glass Coke bottle?
Yeah.
So it seems like people have forgotten all the little things like that.
But, yeah, it's hard to eat it out of there, but
yeah, that's a cool little prank. But we put rosemary with our tomatoes, and they kind of pick up that flavor. We liked it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I really, I don't know, from a, I guess, a trend standpoint, I would for sure say that more edible things, more, you know, more useful plant material is becoming more and more popular, instead of, and there's always the place for your big box row hedges and your very symmetrical and ornate landscape. There's always a place for that, but still seeing a lot more people kind of, they want a little bit of that, but they also want some useful aspects of it too. And I don't know, to me that's exciting. You know, you get to mix some stuff in, or people would maybe, it seems like some people are wanting to entertain the idea of maybe using, instead of turning an area just into just highly manicured sod, you know, just more turf to cut. They want to take and carve out some areas and let it go to seed, let it become more of like a wildflower meadow area where you can actually encourage more pollinators into the area, more bugs, more birds, more of this, you know, just kind of creating an area for more things to be natural. And I'm all for that too. So, but if there are other questions that we can answer, or if you guys want to ask stuff, we're happy to share anything that you guys have interest in. So if you guys don't have anything else, we'll do it again next week.
Good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.